Welcome to Deep Dive, the first created AI podcast on software development, brought to life by Scio's leadership with over 20 years of experience from our CEO and partners in strategic digital nearshoring and much more. From Mexico and Latin America, we're here to share insights from working with one of the world's most demanding markets, the US. If you're looking to improve the performance of your development team, make them more efficient and culturally aligned, you're in the right place. Get ready for expert tips and strategies designed to take your tech team to the next level right here on Deep Dive.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be exploring a really interesting topic. It's a new approach to business partnerships. We're calling it the outcomes-driven engagement model. And we're going to be looking at it through the lens of a software development company called Scio. Now, the idea here is, what if you could ditch that old transactional mindset and really truly collaborate with the people you work with to achieve some measurable results? That's what this model is all about.
Yeah, it's really exciting stuff. It kind of flips the script on how we normally think about working with service providers. Like you said, it's not just about getting a task done. It's really about making a difference in your business.
Yeah.
Achieving an outcome that really moves the needle.
Yeah, it's like instead of just checking those boxes on a contract, you and the people you're working with, you're both striving for the same goal.
Exactly. And to really see this model in action, we're going to be taking a look at Scio. They've been using this model with a ton of success. And we're lucky enough to have some insights from their CEO, Luis Alberto.
Oh, that's awesome. And we know Scio, they primarily use a nearshoring model, right?
Mm-hmm.
They work with teams that are closer to their North American clients' time zones.
Yeah.
So before we get into the specifics of how Scio operates, can you kind of break down what the more traditional model, that transactional model looks like, in contrast to this outcomes-driven approach?
Sure. So in the traditional model, you often see it's very transactional, almost impersonal, I would say. You hire someone for a specific project, they deliver exactly what's in the contract, and then that's it. Everyone goes their separate ways. The main focus is on outputs, completing those tasks and delivering those tangible items.
Right, it's very deliverable focused. But with the outcomes-driven model, we're shifting that focus. We're looking at the impact of those deliverables on the business. Like, what are the measurable results that we're trying to achieve?
Exactly. It's about realizing that, let's say developing a new software feature. That's just an output, right? The outcome is whether that feature actually improves the user experience or increases sales or whatever the business goal was.
It's like that classic analogy. Baking a cake, you can follow the recipe perfectly. You end up with a beautiful cake. But if nobody enjoys eating it, what's the point?
Exactly. The cake is the output. The enjoyment, the celebration, that's the outcome. And that's what this model prioritizes.
So how does this shift in focus from outputs to outcomes? How does that actually change the dynamic between the client and the service provider?
Well, one of the key things it does is it really shifts the focus on accountability. In a traditional model, it's often the service provider who is solely accountable for hitting those deadlines and delivering on their promises. But in this model, both sides share that responsibility.
That makes a lot of sense. It's not about pointing fingers when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
It's about working together to solve those problems and make sure you're both moving towards that same goal.
Absolutely. And this shared accountability really fosters a sense of true partnership. It's a we're in this together mentality. And that's something that Scio really emphasizes.
So they're not just a vendor fulfilling a contract. They're really invested in their client's success.
Exactly. And they believe that that shared investment leads to better outcomes for everybody involved. And that's something we'll explore further when we discuss Scio's approach to building those long-term adaptable relationships with their clients.
So we're starting to see how this outcomes-driven model is really shifting the way businesses think about these partnerships. It's not just about ticking off boxes. It's about creating real value and achieving tangible results together.
Right. And with that in mind, let's dig into how Scio actually implements this model. How do they make sure both parties are aligned on those desired outcomes? How do they measure success? Those are the questions we'll unpack next.
So we've talked about this idea of shared accountability, this we're in this together mentality. How does that actually work when Scio is working with a client?
Well, it all starts with really understanding the client, their needs, their goal. They don't just jump into writing code or anything like that. They really invest the time up front to understand the client's business, their target market, what they're hoping to achieve with this software.
So it's not just about building a product, it's about actually solving a problem for the business.
Exactly. And that's where that collaboration really begins. They work really closely with the client. to define those desired outcomes and make sure that everyone is on the same page from the start. What are the metrics for success? How are we going to measure the impact of this software? They address all of those crucial questions right up front.
It sounds like that requires a lot of trust, a lot of transparency between Scio and the client.
Oh, absolutely. Open communication is key. They have those regular check-ins and progress meetings, not just to report on, what tasks have been completed, but to discuss the real impact of the work and ensure that they're on track to hit those targets.
Yeah, it's interesting because in that traditional model, those meetings can feel very transactional. Here's what we did this week, here's what's coming up next week. But it sounds like with this model, those conversations are way more strategic.
Yeah, they're definitely focused on the bigger picture. And this focus on communication and collaboration, it ties into another really important piece of this model, flexibility.
Right. You mentioned earlier that Scio really tries to build these long-term relationships with their clients. So where does flexibility come into play?
Well, in that traditional model, you often see these very rigid contracts that lay out a super specific scope of work. And if something changes, it can be a real nightmare to try and renegotiate or adjust the plan. But Scio gets it. Things change all the time. Business needs evolve, new challenges pop up, priorities shift.
Especially in the world of software development, what works today might be totally obsolete tomorrow.
Exactly, so they don't want to lock themselves in to these rigid agreements. Their contracts are designed to be much more flexible, adaptable. This allows them to, pivot and adjust as needed. So they're always delivering value, even if that original plan has to change.
It makes so much sense. It's all about being agile, being responsive.
Right. It's recognizing that building software, it's an iterative process. You're constantly learning, you're adapting based on feedback and new information.
So it's not just about delivering a product, it's about providing a service.
Yeah.
That helps the client reach those goals over long term.
It is, and it requires a different approach to relationships as well. Scio really emphasizes something called cultural alignment with their clients.
Cultural alignment, what do you mean by that?
Well, it goes beyond just understanding the client's business goals. It's about understanding their values, their work style, their communication preferences. It's about truly becoming an extension of their team, not just an outside vendor.
So it's about really understanding how they work.
Exactly. Scio believes that this cultural alignment is crucial for building those really strong, lasting partnerships. It's about that shared understanding, that sense of camaraderie that goes way beyond that typical client-vendor relationship.
It's not just about getting the job done. It's about enjoying working together.
Exactly, and that brings us back to the core of this whole outcomes-driven model, focusing on those outcomes, not just the outputs. Shared accountability, flexibility. Building those strong relationships based on trust and values. And, as we've seen with Scio, it can lead to some amazing results.
This has been so insightful. It's clear that this model is about so much more than just software. It's a whole different way of approaching business partnerships.
It really makes you wonder, could this model work in other industries? What would it look like to use this approach in your own work or business?
This is a really great question for our listeners to think about. We've gone over the principles, we've seen how Scio uses them, but now it's time for everyone to consider how this might translate to their own world.
Yeah, it really does make you think, this whole idea of shifting our focus from just getting those tasks done to actually understanding the impact we're trying to make. It is, and it really challenges us to think differently about, the roles we play in these partnerships, whether you're the client or the service provider. It's about moving beyond that transactional way of thinking and really investing in building those collaborative relationships.
We've seen it work in the software world with Scio.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how do you think this model could translate to other industries?
I think the principles are universal, really. It's about realizing that success comes from achieving those outcomes, not just checking things off a list. And to do that, it takes a commitment to shared accountability. Open communication, you got to be flexible. And you got to be willing to work together as true partners.
So whether you're working with, a marketing agency or a financial advisor, or even just collaborating with colleagues on a project, these principles could apply.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's about asking those key questions, What are we really trying to accomplish here? How are we going to know if we've succeeded? And how can we work together to make it happen?
It's about getting rid of that us versus them mentality and really embracing that we're all in this together approach.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes this model so powerful. It's not just a different way of doing business. It's a different way of thinking about how we relate to each other,
Uh.
and how we can collaborate to create something really great.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the problems with that traditional transactional model. We explored the key principles of this outcomes-driven approach. And we saw how Scio puts it all into practice. It feels like we have a whole new perspective on collaboration now.
I agree, and I hope it's given everyone listening some things to think about.
Yeah, maybe even some ideas for how to apply these principles to their own work and their own relationships.
Because at the end of the day, it's about making those collaborations more successful, more fulfilling, more impactful.
As you go out there and work with others, remember to keep those desired outcomes top of mind. Embrace that shared accountability, and don't be afraid to adapt along the way.
And most importantly, remember that real success comes from working together, not just working next to each other.
That's a great point to wrap things up on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been my pleasure.
Until next time, everyone, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Thank you for joining us on Deep Dive. At Scio, we specialize in helping tech companies build high-performance, dedicated teams with skilled talent from Mexico and Latin America. With over 2 decades working in the U.S. market, we're here to truly help you improve and scale your development capacity. If you're ready to expand your team with trusted, skilled, and easy-to-work-with software developers, remember, we're your strategic nearshore partner. Looking forward to diving deeper with you in the next episode of Deep Dive.